A number of documents I would like to enter into the record this morning with unanimous consent. First of all, I want to ask my colleagues on the other side of the aisle to stop playing politics with justice. Not a single one of you voted for your own party to be held in contempt. I'm the only member of this body, of this committee, that has held both Republicans and Democrats alike in contempt for defying a congressional subpoena. So the hypocrisy is real, and I don't want to hear anyone on the other side of the aisle say no one is above the law here on this. We're talking about human trafficking, sex trafficking. We're talking about children, girls as young as 14 being assaulted, being trafficked by wealthy and powerful people. This is not political. This is personal. This should be nonpartisan. We should be working on this together. And it's incredible that we're politicizing rape, we're politicizing sex trafficking, or politicizing this entire Epstein thing. And it just, as a survivor, I'm telling you, it should not be. And I've done a lot of work, Mr. Chairman, in advocacy and writing legislation for victims of abuse, male, female, and children, man, woman, and child. South Carolina, my home state, Mr. Chairman, has a huge problem with all sorts of violent crimes, but sex trafficking in my state is up by over 400%. We have domestic violence in our state where you can't get a trial. And there was a case last year where a woman 2 years ago was kidnapped by her boyfriend, beaten to a pulp, her face just beaten in. 2 years after he kidnapped her and beat her, he murdered her on Mother's Day because our local solicitor refused to prosecute that case. And I have rogue solicitors and prosecutors and attorneys general who aren't doing anything to protect the people of South Carolina, women and children especially. Recently, my attorney general prosecuted a case against convicted pedophile Donald Gresh. Donald Gresh was convicted of having 1,900 images of toddlers as young as 3 being raped by animals. Donald Gresh, under the prosecution of my Attorney General Alan Wilson, served 1 day in jail. 1 day. Donald Gresh isn't the only pedophile, convicted pedophile, that we prosecute like that. My Attorney General Alan Wilson prosecuted this case. This is Travis Reed Gay. Well, the other thing, too, is that Donald Gresh, he was facing 60 years in jail, got 1 day. Travis Reed Gay was facing 70 years, 7 charges and 70 years in jail in South Carolina. My Attorney General prosecuted this case. He pled guilty in November, didn't serve any time. He got probation. He violated his probation 11 days later, and if he violated his probation, he was to serve time in jail. The magistrate or judge, probably didn't have a law degree, let him out hours later. He has not served any required time for this kind of thing. And I did a press conference with a bunch of moms, over a dozen moms last week in Charleston, South Carolina, and there was a local media blackout. I asked, was it my attorney general who prosecuted this case and led this pedophile out on the streets? Was he the one that led the media blackout? Well, I want my attorney general in my state to know that a young child came forward after seeing my press conference and recognized this man. She filed a police report the same day because he allegedly followed her in a park the week before. This is Scott Spivey, killed, shot with a bullet in the back, shot at 17 times, not prosecuted by my attorney general. So I'm going to ask unanimous consent, Mr. Chairman, to enter those 3 images into the record. This is Weldon Boyd. This is Scott Spivey's killer, who shot him in the back and has never really been investigated or prosecuted for that killing in South Carolina. I would like to enter that into the record, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection, to order.
This is Logan Federico. She was executed a year ago, yesterday to the day, by a man named Alexander Dickey. Alexander Dickey was a convicted criminal. He had 39 arrests, 25 felony charges. He executed this beautiful 22-year-old daughter of Stephen Federico in cold blood after stealing a gun. If her killer, Alexander Dickey, hadn't been let out by a rogue magistrate or judge or a prosecutor or solicitor that didn't care, she would be alive today. Mr. Chairman, I would like to enter her image and her killer's image into the record.
Without objection, to order.
I have another image. This is Eric Bowman. Eric Bowman beat his wife and has been alleged and is being investigated for other abuses against women and potentially underage girls. He was just let out free, Mr. Chairman, out of jail in South Carolina. He is a predator. I have reported him to law enforcement. He's under investigation, but I have written bill after bill about predators like Eric Bowman, about voyeurism, about these sort of criminal sexual allegations. I would like to enter his image into the record.
Without objection to order.
I have two more.
Can we get it? Your time's expired, but I'll recognize you for a UC later on, because I want to make sure everybody stays within their 5 minutes. Chair recognizes Mr. Bell from Missouri.
You know, first and foremost, I think we're doing a disservice to the victims in this case when we refer to it as the Epstein files. It's sex trafficking evidence, and let's call it what it is. And as a prosecutor, we prosecuted these kind of cases when I was DA back home in St. Louis County, and I met with every single victim and victim's family because I wanted them to know that I was here for them, and I thought it was important that we look them in the eye and let them know that we're going to do everything we can to bring them justice and treat them with the dignity and respect that they deserve. And this is no different. That said, I think in D.C., what I've learned in my 11 months here is that this D.C. disease that of staying in this partisan bubble is something that you have to continue to be aware of so that you don't fall into these same hypocritical traps. And I talked to Jamie Raskin because I just wanted to get some perspective on the law. And when we talk about the legal analysis, first and foremost, you can't read a statute. You learn this in constitutional law first day. You can't read a statute and understand the law. You have to understand how it's interpreted by the courts. And the courts have been clear that if there is negotiations, that does not meet the threshold for criminal contempt. And the examples are clear on that. When Steve Bannon was held in contempt, he did not negotiate, he did not reply, he did nothing. Meadows, when he started to reply, then Trump told him not to, and then he ceased with his communications with this body. And so in this case, I agree 100% with our ranking member. I want to hear from the Clintons. I think the victims deserve, we want to hear all the evidence. But what I know as a prosecutor is that we don't start doing depositions before we listen to the evidence. Now, if there's not evidence, okay, then there's other things to consider. But the evidence is here. There is evidence that has been duly voted on to be presented to the American people in a bipartisan manner, and of this evidence, we've received 1%. 1%. I mean, put this in perspective. There's 0%, and then the only thing you can do next is go to 1. That's it. We've got nothing. And now we're going to bring the Clintons in before we even have the evidence. That makes 0 sense, which is close to the 1 that I talked about. And so there's a legal analysis here. There's about what are we doing to ensure that we are doing a real investigation to get these victims the justice that they deserve. And so Ghislaine, whatever her name is, she needs to be brought into this body. And I'm hearing that, oh, well, she's going to plead the Fifth. First of all, then let her. But secondly, legally on most of these questions, she can't plead the Fifth. On grounds that she's going to be incriminated? She's already a criminal. So let's bring her in. Let's do those things. Let's bring in every single person. I don't care what they are, Democrat, Republican, and I've said this publicly, and my mother got on me about this. I don't care if my mother is in the Epstein files. We need to see 100% of the Epstein files to ensure that we are doing right by these victims. The legal analysis does not support criminal contempt, a real investigation, a fair, bipartisan investigation would lead us to the conclusion that we want to hear from the Clintons, that we want to hear from everyone. But right now, we don't even know who else is in the Epstein evidence because Pam Bondi has not turned over that evidence. And that's the massive violation that we're seeing that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle don't seem to have any urgency about. The massive violation of the law, and Pam Bondi needs to be here to answer those questions. But that is like, oh well, we'll put it off. We'll get there. We're working with them. I'll yield the remainder. Sorry, Ranking Member.
And before I recognize Mr. Gill, I want to point out February 11th, Pam Bondi will be in front of the House Judiciary Committee. February 9th.
And working with people on both sides of the aisle on the Epstein files and then working with the victims has been extremely enlightening.
Yeah,
This doesn't sound like unanimous consent.
UC, can you present the unanimous consent?
Oh, here's the unanimous consent.
Yeah, okay.
Through the Epstein thing, this is a tweet that I did about judges. I learned that, not all the judges have been forthcoming with information and files. I tweeted out on November 28th, impeach corrupt judges, especially South Carolina judges. I've done this about a dozen times or more. I'm guilty as charged. Last week, an attorney named Robert Murding, I would like to enter his image into the record too.
Without objection to order.
He is trying to hold me in contempt and told a judge I should be thrown in jail for, among other things, tweeting out that judges should be held in, that judges should be impeached. This is what happens to survivors. This is what happens to victims. And
I'm sorry,
I would like to enter my predator bill into unanimous consent as well.
Without objection to order. And
thank you.
All right, thank you. Chair recognizes Mr. Walkinshaw for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll restate what others have said, which is that anyone who has information relevant to our investigation, including President Clinton, should talk to the committee. And I'm glad that he's agreed to do so. I have read, Mr. Chairman, that one of the sticking points in the negotiation between you and the Clintons' lawyers has been your demand that questions be asked about non-Epstein related issues. And it surprised me because I'm sitting here today listening to your intense interest in understanding more about the Clintons and their relationship with Epstein. So I'm curious why you have for 5 months demanded that you and other members of this committee be able to ask questions unrelated to our investigation of the Epstein files and Epstein's sex trafficking. And I'm happy to yield, Mr. Chairman.
I don't know what you're talking about. Everything that we've pertained to with respect to the deposition pertains to the Epstein files.
Okay, so you haven't demanded that the conversation, the questions be limited to the Epstein files.
The staff attorneys are communicating with the Clinton attorneys. That's the communication going back and forth. This investigation is about the Epstein files.
Okay, so you're willing, and you'll say here publicly, you're willing to have that conversation that limits the conversation, the questions just to the Epstein issue and files. Okay.
Yes.
All right. I think the Clintons' lawyers have been under a different impression, so we've made a little progress.
The Clinton lawyers are full of crap.
Made a little progress on the negotiation here today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're 32 days past the statutory deadline and months since this committee's subpoena, and Congress has received, as we've heard, just 1% of the files. More than 5 million pages remain hidden. Instead of holding the Attorney General accountable for this failure, the majority is trying to change the subject today. Frankly, I find it insulting. We have to bring our attention back to the people who should be our focus, the survivors of Epstein's horrific sex trafficking operation, the women and girls who were exploited, abused, ignored for years. They deserve the truth, transparency, and justice without delay, without excuses, and without any political protections for the powerful or the wealthy. That's what we should be doing. Not scoring partisan points, not creating distractions, working to uncover the full scope of his crime so the survivors can see accountability. And if we're truly serious about justice, we can't ignore one of Epstein's most well-documented associates, President Donald J. Trump. We have documented communications, including a signed birthday note from Donald Trump containing explicit sexual references and referencing wonderful secrets between them. Emails from Epstein saying that Trump, quote, knew about the girls. Donald Trump acknowledging he knew Epstein was a, quote, creep and that Epstein recruited girls and women from Mar-a-Lago. Trump saying he wants to cover up the files because, quote, my friends will get hurt. If we're committed to transparency and justice, why is that off limits for this committee? Why is his name absent? Why no discussion of Attorney General Bondi's refusal to comply for months with this committee's subpoena? Why no contempt for Attorney General Bondi? What we're witnessing today is not oversight, it's not accountability, it's part of a cover-up, a diversion. And it didn't start today. Despite clear legal requirements in a law that Donald Trump signed, a subpoena that you signed, Mr. Chairman, and repeated public promises, Attorney General Bondi has failed to release the files. It's entirely within her control, and yet only 1% has been produced, more than a month late. And even that sliver is so heavily redacted that it mocks the law. It mocks the law. And it mocks this committee's subpoena. And let's be honest about the transparency that Attorney General Bondi has provided. This is DOJ Epstein data set number 4. It's number 4. Data set number 4. This is part of the 1% that folks have been talking about this today. I'll close with this. Attorney General Bondi and the Trump administration missed their deadline. They're ignoring our subpoena. They've withheld 99% of the files, and they have obscured the little that they did release. It's not a coincidence. It's intentional. It's about protecting one man, Donald J. Trump, from accountability. Release the files. I yield back.
Chair recognizes.
Mr. Chair, have unanimous consent requests?
Okay, I'll recognize you for that.
Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to enter the record a political article entitled Clay Higgins Explains Why He Was the Lone No Vote on Epstein Files Release.
Without objection to order. Chair recognizes it'll be on our side Mr. Perry, then Mr. McGuire. Mr. Perry.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'm disappointed at where we're headed here. Look, I think that legitimately both sides want all the information. I know I sure do, with the proviso that the victims and innocent people are not damaged in the release of that. What's interesting to me is that the only time my colleagues on the other side of the aisle want to talk about any of this is when they can bring up the current president's name, but they're not interested at all in anything else. And I would just say this regarding the timeline, because I'm frustrated with it too. You know what would have been great? Would have been awesome if we could have truncated the timeline when the Democrat DOJ was in power under a Democrat president and there was any investigation whatsoever. Ladies and gentlemen, my friends on the other side of the aisle weren't interested in these victims at all when they could have done something about it. Nary a word was said, and certainly nothing was done. All this advance work could have been done by them had they cared. But this is not about caring about anybody. This is all political theater because they hate the current president of the United States. I get it. It's disappointing to me. These victims should have their day, and they should, all this information, regardless of who it touches, should be out, with the proviso that the innocent are protected. I know that's not of any interest to you. I get it. That's unfortunate. I yield the balance of my time to the gentleman from Louisiana.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. Mr. Chairman, earlier I asked unanimous consent to receive into the record the actual subpoena presented to the Honorable Pam Bondi by this committee regarding the DOJ's release of the investigative files on Jeffrey Epstein that was dated the 5th of August. I'd like to enter into unanimous consent associated with that entry, the letter written by this committee on August the 5th to Attorney General Pam Bondi, referencing the subpoena and giving specific instructions.
Without objection, so ordered.
I'd like to also enter into the record actually, I don't believe this has been released prior to right now, is the schedule associated with the subpoena. This is 1, 2, 3, 4 pages of specific instructions from this committee regarding the subpoena delivered on August the 5th. Now, unanimous consent.
Without objection, to
that
ordered.
schedule as well. I'm sure the media will be fascinated with that. So the professionalism that this committee has pursued to clarify for the citizenry, the professionalism that this committee has embraced and pursued has been squared away, impeccable. And that includes recognition that the Department of Justice, as stated in the subpoena, is to comply with redaction procedures of established law and criminal justice, long-standing procedures. So I heard someone mention 5 million files. That is the first time I've heard 5 million files. But I know that there were originally 250,000 files. And the Trump administration found another 600,000 files. So we were talking about, to round it off, 1 million files. Every one of those individual documents has to be reviewed by agents of the DOJ and their supervisors before they can be officially approved for release. That's the law. The DOJ has 400 agents working full-time on just releasing these documents. Now, you may argue that at the end of the day, you want to see the release of what they completed that day. I would say that's a fair narrative for discussion. But to say that DOJ is not fully engaged in complying with our subpoena is not accurate. It's not intellectually sound. And, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the opportunity to offer into the record these official and legal subpoena documents. I yield.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Chair, I have a unanimous consent request.
Okay, Mr. Frost.
I have 2 articles. One is from Politics PA. Quote, Representative Perry referred to the House Ethics Committee for refusing subpoena.
Without objection, so ordered.
The other one's a CNN article. GOP reps Perry and Biggs formally object to subpoena from House January 6th
Without
committee.
objection, so ordered. Chair recognizes Ms. Crockett from Texas.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I have sat here listening, and I am quite perplexed. It does take me back to my legal days. And so when I think about a subpoena, one of the things that we normally look at when we are trying to determine whether or not contempt is going to be ushered into the conversation is whether or not there's been substantial compliance. And what it means to actually look like you have substantially complied. It means that you're taking reasonable steps to follow a court order, that you're acting in good faith, and typically that serves as a defense. So if we are still crafting the parameters of said subpoena, for instance, my colleague, Mr. Walkinshaw, just asked whether or not this would be limited to the Epstein subject matter. For me, if they responded at all, then there is some sort of compliance, which they did. They didn't just throw the bird. They didn't just say, forget it. But more importantly, I just want to point out that we are living in an age of hypocrisy, because my other colleague just pointed out that Mr. Perry sits here and somehow sits in judgment of others. Frankly, that is what people are kind of getting annoyed by, is the hypocrisy, because Mr. Perry still has an outstanding subpoena that was never complied with. In addition to that, he talked about we need to care for the victims. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, and I will yield my time. But I don't believe that Mr. Perry ever signed off on the discharge petition in the first place. So I don't know if he is just doing what he believes is politically expedient, but I will tell you this. I refuse to be a puppet, because Democrats tend to be of goodwill. We always want to do the right thing. We are always trying to follow the rules and follow the law. Unfortunately, we are living with an administration that does not care. We just want some type of parity. So, for instance, we all want to hear from President Clinton. If for some reason you said, we will give you, say, Pam Bondi, and then we've got President Clinton with it, or say maybe President Trump and President Clinton, two presidents, because we know that both presidents actually had a relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. But what looks political and looks like one can get away with everything, especially since that's what the Supreme Court has stated, that's why it looks like it's just gamesmanship. You only care about following the rules so long as you can invoke those rules on what is typically perceived as your political enemies. This is why we are falling apart in this country. We are supposed to be about checks and balances. It should not matter whether or not you're associated with the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, independent, or whomever, whether you're rich, whether you're poor, whether you're middle class, whether you're a black immigrant, or whatever. But it seems like we only have a political agenda in this committee, and that's why everything goes off the rails. You only love law enforcement when they're going after black, brown, immigrants, that kind of folk, right? But on January 6th, you didn't care about law enforcement because they still don't have their plaques up. We continue to do the right thing and say, yes, apply the rules equally across the board, and then y'all play in our faces and you only apply it to one side. I am asking for one commitment, and then I will yield to the ranking member. Mr. Chair, will you commit to me, as the chair of probably the most important committee in this Congress, especially in this moment where people are concerned about the level of corruption that exists within this committee, will you promise me that you are good for doing whatever is right and following the evidence, no matter who is on the other side of that evidence?
Yes,
Yes,
and that is why I subpoenaed the estate. And we had no idea what was, nobody knew what was in the estate documents. And I, without hesitation, subpoenaed the estate. We've subpoenaed the Department of Justice.
And that's where we got the birthday letter. We subpoenaed the estate. Hold on, Mr.
subpoena, right.
Okay, we got the birthday letter, but we can't just get the evidence and then not follow up on the evidence that we actually get. I will relinquish the rest of my time to the chair.
Thank you. I just want to just really clarify one. Thank you very much, Representative Crockett. Just to back to Mr. Walkinshaw's point, I think it's important to clarify that in communication, Mr. Chair, with your team and the back and forth with the emails, the Clinton team made it clear that they wanted to answer questions about Epstein, but that was not something that your team agreed to, only about Epstein. And so that's, I just want to make sure to be clarified, and I appreciate you clarifying, Mr. Comer, that you said that you would limit the questions to only Epstein. Is that correct?
That is correct.
I
And
think
what the
that's-
Clinton said that is not true. What their lawyer said is a complete lie.
Well, I'm glad that you clarified for them, because it's been their impression that it's been. I'm just telling you, it's been their impression.
He's paid them too much money then over the last 5 months.
And sir, I'm just reading emails, and I'm just reading the back and forth between them and your team. It's been their impression that those questions were going to be beyond just Epstein, and so I'm glad that's been clarified. So thank you, Mr. Walkinshaw.
Chair recognizes Mr. McGuire from Virginia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.